Hello, everyone, and this is Dan solo casting for Tome of Uselessness. I wanted to today talk a little bit about Tron from 1982. I don't think I'm going to really dip into the sequel, Tron from 2011, Legacy. So the movie is written and directed by Steven Leisberger. Like I said, came out in 1982, and this movie is a classic now. At the time, it was not well received. It only did $33 million box office from US. I don't have worldwide numbers. And it had an estimated $17 million budget. So Disney wasn't too happy with the results. But over time, this movie has become recognized as the influence and the movie that it should have been, and it's great. I would highly recommend watching it. I'm not going to talk too much spoiler stuff, but briefly the story is Jeff Bridges plays Kevin Flynn, and he is trying to find evidence of computer programs that he wrote, video games specifically, that were stolen from him. And then he gets help from Alan Bradley, played by Bruce Boxleitner, and Cindy Morgan, who plays Laura. They help him get back into the company offices, and then while he's there, he gets codified and digitized and placed into the game grid by the evil computer, the master control program, essentially, that's run by David Warner, who plays Ed Dillinger / Sark, and he interacts with the master control program. He was the one who stole the video game programs from Jeff Bridges, and he's trying to keep that evidence down because now he's VP executive, and he's got the master control program, which is it's depicted as essentially almost like an AI that's learning and becoming more powerful and is taking over the system kind of thing. It's all nebulous because this was back, of course, when computers weren't as well known. And so it's great. So he gets into the game grid, and then he just goes on an adventure of trying to stop the master control program and to help Tron, which is the program being written by Alan, which is like a security program. It's meant to check and balance programs so they're not doing things that aren't, what the users wanted. So that's the whole point, is that the MCP is going beyond its user commands. And so it's all scary, as it were. But so yeah, they go on the adventure to try to free the system from the master control program. They meet other programs on the way, and he fights on the game grid. Famously, if you've never seen the movie, which I would think is rare, but they do a light cycle battle scene, and just some primitive type video game stuff, but it's excellent to see from the inside of the computer, essentially. So, to be fair, there's a couple things I don't like about the movie. The main one, of course, is the costumes. Now, they're famously wearing hockey padding and some motocross type stuff almost, and onesie leotards. The hockey helmets are what I have the problem with. Everything else kind of looks okay, but the guards, their padding again is a little bulky and weird. Sark, they gave him custom stuff, so it looks a little more sci-fi, a little more weird. But everyone else, it sort of kind of makes sense that they're wearing helmets because they're on a game grid and they're gonna battle. But I just wish they had done something a little different there. The rest of the chest plate stuff and everything, I find looks okay. The leotard works as well because then it's gives everybody a uniform look. Again, famously, everyone's all glowing and colorized at different points and different times. Good programs, bad programs, and it's all hand animated. It's beautiful. Like I said, just the costumes kind of there could have been better, and maybe again that was some budgetary stuff. And now, of course, we could do things with CG and etc. to make it look better. But it's just the helmets mostly that I have the biggest problem with. Everything else is pretty cool. It's different because with Yori's character, she just has the onesie covers her entire head and just her face is exposed, so that works really well. But everyone else, like I said, it's a combat kind of thing, so I get it. Not my favorite. And the second thing is there's a scene where they're escaping on this solar kind of, I forget what exactly they call it, but it's got sails and it's traveling along this energy beam, and then they cut to a square grid, and then they're oh no, the grid spiders might come after us, and it looks, whereas everything else in the movie not everything else, but all the stuff inside the computer is CG, early CG, of course. But this looks like a hand animated, like almost like a Fantasia type sequence, where these like spiders come up, and then like multiple of them come up. So I'm not 100% if that's CG or not, but then we just get a voiceover from Cindy Morgan playing Yori, just being like, "Oh, I hope they don't get us," and then they're never mentioned again. Nothing. They never show up. So I don't know if they just ran out of time or budget or just didn't work, because like an attack scene of some sort could have been cool and they fend them off or something, but it's just never mentioned. It just shows up and then they're gone. So that always to me still sticks out as weird and not really necessary. But other than that, like I said, those are my two main kind of gripes with it, but everything else about the movie is really great. I really like Jeff Bridges in the role. He kind of elevates this movie because his counterpartner, Tron / Alan, he's kind of boring, but I guess it's kind of also his character. But Jeff Bridges is, especially when he's in the real world as Flynn, he's like this cocky, smarmy guy who's so sure of himself and juvenile, which is hilarious. The depiction of him playing video games in the beginning, like an arcade, and they make it all like kiddie and everything, that it's like, oh, only kids play video games, and isn't weird this older guy's playing a game, which is hilarious now, of course. But he's really great. Like all of his dialogue and everything sounds so natural, and he's just so chill and zen as this hacker who knows he's that good. So his performance is just so great in pretty much the whole movie. It's pretty awesome. Worth for that. I really do like this movie is dated. Like I said, 1982, but it works for the movie because, as I was saying earlier, the CG and when they're inside the computer, it's all very rudimentary, very old style, of course, because they were basically pioneering it, and it totally works for the movie because it's depicting this old computer system. It's not depicting something in the future and looking all futuristic. So the square tanks and the square world and everything that they're in, it totally works for the movie, and it doesn't detract from it, even watching it now. And I love a lot of the sequences because, again, they're in CG, like... they famously, there's a light cycle scene where they're driving around on the Tron bikes, and after the battle they escape, and they're going through like these trenches and canyons, but the camera is like totally locked down, and so you just like see it normally, or you see it from behind them, and I really like it because it's not like a crazy, like they do nowadays, mostly in movies, where as soon as it's becoming an animated sequence, they just do everything with the camera. The camera rotates 360 degrees around, and it looks all fancy, and you can't even tell what's happening. Whereas this, you're like, oh, there's some bikes, and then they drive around like a corner, and then they drive down in the distance, and it works totally well, and you can understand and see what's going on, despite how rudimentary it all looks. So the dated look works really well for the movie. I think it's just great. Like I said, early CG, this movie took flack for back then for having its special effects done by a computer. It's cheating and etc. Where of course that's 100% reversed now, where every movie has a digital effects 90% of the time, whether it's hidden or in your face. So it's just hilarious, of course, that the attitudes have changed. Doing some more research into the movie, I found out the part, like I was saying earlier, that they hand animated all of the light on the costumes, and then which also meant that they hand animated all the light in the sets, and that the sets that the actors were on were black and white when they were inside the computer system, or in like the tanks and stuff like that. They show like Jeff Bridges in the beginning, his program that he's written is in a tank and it's driving around. All those sets were black and white, and everything was all animated later, which again, I thought that was just an impressive and cool trick, so that they could light this in an unnatural way, and because everyone's all gray essentially the entire movie, and I just didn't realize that that was the technique they used, and very cool. And another small nod I like in the movie is how they have like computer terms and computer names for things. Like one of the characters is named Ram, and he's supposed to be a programmer. Of course, we all know now what RAM really is. And so they use all sorts of computer terms and computer words for things, just sprinkled here and there. Not too in your face about it, but like if you know computing, you know what they're referring to, but it's referring like wrong or just using it in a different context. So again, this was made in a time when computing wasn't as well known, and there was no internet. It was still hidden away by the DARPA people and stuff like that. So like I said, it's all like small nods, and if you know the terms and you know what they're referring to, it actually is, I find, it's just kind of like a small chuckle to me when they talk about something and I'm just, they're referring to something. It's great. Like I said, there's a couple small Easter eggs. Like at one point, Pac-Man shows up in a small scene and etc. kind of thing to look out for. So yeah, I don't think there is much more I'm going to say. Like I said, I don't want to get into too much spoiler stuff. If you've never seen the movie, definitely go get it, watch it. I do recommend the Tron Legacy. I also do enjoy it. It's not as good in a sense story-wise, but it's still very enjoyable, especially the soundtrack. The soundtrack for Tron as well is pretty cool because they had to do a mix essentially of symphony and electronica stuff and a synthesizer. So it's all these different sounds, especially when they're transitioning from the real world to the digital world. So a lot of good stuff in there. Very enjoyable movie. Highly recommend you watch it. Check it out. If you want to hear more content with Devin and I specifically, we of course have our website, Tome of Uselessness. We're available on iTunes and all podcasting platforms, as well as we have an Instagram, Tome of Uselessness with underscores. Check us out. Thanks a lot for listening.